All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another live stream. Thanks for joining this week. And today we're going to continue along with our theme of generative AI, specifically in the LLM, chat GPT, whatever you want to call it, tech stuff. We're going to talk about that. So today we're going to be talking about prompt engineering. Now, so what is prompt engineering? You may have heard about this. It's become quite a popular term, and even some people are now being hired directly as prompt engineers at some companies. So we want to talk about that, the benefits of it, and we're going to talk some specifics around how you can use it specifically to your own benefit. Now, the interesting thing about prompt engineering is that it's not necessarily a technical activity in my mind. So we will be doing some actual Python coding today, but we are largely just going to be using the ChatGPT UI, at least in the beginning, just to show you how the prompt engineering things are going to work. Now, I did say we are going to be using ChatGPT, but and that's just because that is the most popular variant out there right now. But prompt engineering is certainly not limited to ChatGPT. I don't know if you all saw, but just in the past week, Hugging Face created their own website with what is known as Hugging Chat, which is basically their own variant of ChatGPT. And I was actually just playing with it right before the live stream, and it looks really cool. And we've already seen Google Bard as well. Now to be transparent, I really have not played around with Hugging Chat that much, but I mean, when I tried to do some things with it, I mean, it was pretty cool. But we're gonna stay with ChatGPT today specifically, just because I don't want to, I want to keep things a little bit more simple for this one. So, so what is prompt engineering, and why is it important? So first, let's take a step back and ask ourselves, what is a prompt? And by the way, I am writing a new blog post right now on like a full glossary of generative AI terms. And the idea with that is, there are a lot of terms floating around in the space, and we'll talk about some of them here. But the idea with that blog post is that if you ever need a reference source to be able to refer to these terms that we're going to talk about today, it should be nice. It'll be there in a nice, neat format for you in the blog post form. So what is a prompt? So a prompt is basically just an input into one of these generative AI models. So when you think about using ChatGPT specifically, you are thinking about the question you might ask or the thing that you want to know. So it's just what you were typing in the chat. So prompt engineering is this idea of writing the prompt in such a way that you are getting the best results out of the like what you're hoping to retrieve from. And so the really interesting thing about prompt engineering is like that. So I've had the privilege of working with many companies lately to talk about generative AI and what their experience is and what the recommendation is. And so for those of you already in the machine learning world, you might already be familiar with this concept of transfer learning. And if you're not familiar with that, so what that is, actually this might help with a little visual. Let me see if I can pull one up really quick. I'm trying to think. Oh my gosh, I just blanked on what I was trying to do there. I wasn't planning on showing this, so that's why I'm a little bit scatterbrained on this. Sorry, I'm just pulling up my graphic design software because I made a graphic of a neural network, and I wanted to show that. Okay. All right, there we go. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Where are we at? Okay, so this is my very, very simple neural network. So, without going too deep into this, because that isn't the purpose of today's stream. So, what transfer learning is basically this idea of, prior to all these models coming out before, these larger companies like Google and whatnot have created these or TensorFlow. Well, through TensorFlow, I guess, because Google owns TensorFlow now. They created these pre-trained models that were too difficult for most people to train, even most companies to train. So like image classification models. So they'll create these general purpose image classification models to be able to detect a wide range of images. But let's say you have your own body of images that you want to leverage basically the training structure of this neural network, but you don't necessarily want to go through the whole cost and shebang of having to train your own thing. So the idea of the neural network is, so if you imagine that each of these columns here, represent like an individual hidden layer of what are known as neurons. Then what you could do is, so this, like the last layer here on the right would be the output neurons of, in this minor diagram, so you'd have like 3 output classes here. What you could do is you could basically strip off this last layer or the last 2 layers or whatnot. And by the way, these deep learning models, they're generally like 32, 64 layers deep, much deeper than I'm representing here. But the idea is that then you could retrain that on, or you could just train the last layer only on your own data, and then have the model or the predictive model be able to like perform well on your data specifically without having to do the full retrain. So that's the whole concept of transformer learning. I didn't plan on showing this. I probably did a poor job of representing that. So the big question is with these large language models is, if we want to squeeze the most value out of these models, would it behoove us to basically do the same idea of transfer learning here? And so the 2 answers I've constantly come across is, number one is folks like OpenAI or these other companies are not inclined to allow that, meaning that, because these are closed source models, so they don't necessarily want to share out these models as we would typically. By the way, I'm checking my mic levels because I watched back last week and I noticed my mic levels were really hot, so I'm turning myself down a little bit. So apologize last week if the mic seemed really off for that. Oh, by the way, I am taking questions across LinkedIn and YouTube, so feel free to drop them in. There's about a 20-second delay, so if I don't see it right away, that would be why. Okay, got sidetracked. So what was I talking about there? Oh yeah, so back to prompt engineering. Yeah, OpenAI does not allow you to do the whole transfer learning concept, but even more important than that is across the breadth of companies that I've talked about with prompt engineering, or with these large language models like ChatGPT, is they're actually finding that prompt engineering almost serves just as well as transfer learning. Meaning, and you'll see with prompt engineering, it's actually a lot, you could get up and going much quicker because you don't have to have the technical whatever to be able to do this, chop off the last layer and the retrain. Because, that is not I wouldn't call that a trivial task. Like it's easier than training your full neural network, but is not as easy as prompt engineering is. So again, basically, let me just recap that really quick. Basically, prompt engineering is producing very good results. Okay. So that is prompt engineering. So what prompt engineering kind of manifests? So let me introduce you to a couple more terms. So when we talk about prompt engineering specifically, you may come across terms as zero-shot prompting, one-shot prompting, or few-shot prompting. Those are the 3 that I see collectively. One-shot prompting you may or may not see, because some people just like to prefer to use the zero or the few-shot prompting. So basically what that is saying is, a zero-shot prompt is a prompt where you are asking a question or making a request and making really no specifications around the context or the format in which you want to return. So it's very, very bare bones. Whereas one or few shot prompting is where you provide one or many different sorts of contextual things to help you get a more precise results out of these large language models. And so we actually did this a little bit last week in our live stream, and I'll review that here in just a little bit. Actually, let's go ahead and review that now. So if you didn't watch last week's live stream, no worries at all. Let me share my screen again to show you what we did. So last week, what we did is we created our own Python script. And so what this Python script is doing is when we initiate it through the command line, it's basically emulating the ChatGPT chat interface. But the one thing, so this is prompt engineering tip number 1, is that you can set, and this is what we covered last week, you can set a role of a system user prior to actually interacting with the chat flow. So we're doing it programmatically here. Like I said, you can also do this directly in like the ChatGPT UI here. And so if you recall last week, what we did here is we set the system user to be Jar Jar Binks. So because this is programmatic, the user does not see this. So when I initiate this from the thing here, so Python 3 chat.py. All right, so what would I like to ask? Let me ask. I don't know. Why can't I think of something to ask? I don't know. I keep defaulting to this one, so just because it's, I don't know, easy. What is the capital of Illinois? All right. And so you can see there is no indication on the UI here that Jar Jar Binks is giving the response here. But as you can see with the response, that I don't know if y'all recall last week when we just kept doing the Jar Jar Binks stuff, that it made me laugh every time. But that's basically what this is doing here. So this is a simple prompting where you are asking ChatGPT or any other large language model to act as if they are one role and give that response as that role. Now, obviously, we're doing a silly thing here with Jar Jar Binks, but you can imagine where you might say, I am a customer service representative. I am an expert software engineer. I am whatever role you want to fill in the blank. That is prompt engineering tip number one. And so I think there might be, I don't know if there's formalized terms for all these things yet, but this is one way in which you can set the prompting. So the one thing that you're going to begin noticing right away is that, if you look at what we did here, let me see if I can make this bigger. There we go. Oh, by the way, if you all didn't notice, in the last week I switched from IntelliJ to VS Code. And so now I'm using VS Code. I've joined the dark side. Not really. Like I really love IntelliJ. To be completely honest, if you want to know why I switched, is because I discovered that VS Code has a really, really nice Jupyter plugin for running Jupyter notebooks, whereas that functionality is only available in the Ultimate Edition of IntelliJ. And frankly, I'm too cheap for it to pay for that. So I switched to VS Code this week, and so I'm enjoying VS Code so far. I'm still figuring things out as I go. I also really like the mini map up here. So the mini map being like a a very, very small representation of the code I already written. But anyway, you can see here that that the way that we set this is very, I would call it, non-technical. And so, to be transparent with you, I am taking a prompt engineering course that I found on Udemy, and the instructor for this course actually appears to be non-technical himself. And I don't mean that as a judgmental statement at all, but it's just this idea of, prompt engineering is not necessarily something that is you got to have a computer science degree for it. If anything, I would actually say prompt engineering is this idea that you keep experimenting with the results of, plain language like this until you have something that works well. And that is going to be very, very subjective. This is a kind of a new kind of world. When you think about coding in general, the reason that coding has such specific syntax is, it had to be specific so the computer would be very, very precise to know that when you say a print statement, then we are printing out this line. Whereas now we are getting into the world of semantics where, you don't necessarily need to have a firm, this is what this syntax looks like. Now you can just use your plain English language. And that is not at all saying that I think coding is going away anytime soon. I don't know if ever, honestly, but it's just to say that with prompt engineering, you don't necessarily need to be a software engineer, machine learning engineer to be able to do these kinds of things. Okay, so that is tip number one. That is or prompt engineering tip number one is the idea that you can set yourself like this assistant. So another thing that you can do, and what we're basically going to be doing today is just giving a couple of different things of ideas that you can try, and we're starting from like most basic to more complex, and I'm going to show you programmatically how you can make this build something into a system that's going to look really nice or like behave really nice if you wanted to automate things in a really nice way. And I know that's kind of confusing, but it'll make sense here in a little bit. Okay, so that was tip number one, was acting as a certain role. So tip number two is you can actually export data as a table. So I don't know if any of you have tried this yet. So let's say I was interested in the top 5 most populous cities in the United States. I could ask, what are the top 5 most popular. Here, let me move my face here because I know I'm gonna cover it there for a second. All right, what are the top 5? And I apologize that the UI is really small here. Let me see if I can blow this up for you. All right, there you go. What are the top 5 most populous cities in the United States? Okay, so while this is running, this would be referred to as zero-shot prompting. And so the reason we call it zero-shot prompting is I'm asking a question, and well, I guess you could say that maybe this is one-shot prompt because I am asking only for the top 5. If I were to just ask for the most populous cities, I believe it would give you the top 10, and then it would cut off. But you could see that it just gave it here in a bulleted form. What you may not know is that you can actually get it into a table form. And let me go ahead and redo this prompt. I'm going to start this as a new chat. And let's see what, and I'm going to read, and again, we're just using plain English language to describe this. So what are the most populous cities in the United States? Please display the information in a table. The table should have 2 columns. The first column being the city name, and the second column being the number of people in that city. Okay. All right. And now you will see here in a second that we are getting a table format. All right, you can see that. All right, my face is a little bit in the way, but y'all get the idea. Oh, whoops, I forgot to put top 5. It gave me the top 10 anyway. All right, but that's what that is. So that's pretty cool. And even if you use, so we're doing this in the UI, even if you do this in the API form, it will still give back what is known as a markdown table string, which means it's, because when we receive back the results via the API, they're all string-based values. However, if you're not aware of, you can actually use Markdown to create tables with just basic string-based characters. And so whenever if you were to do this in the API, you would get that whole string back, and then you could generate that as a table. So even if you're doing this programmatically through this API, you can still get the results here that we are seeing in a very nice table-like format. Now, you'll notice that I forgot to limit it just to the top 5. And that's my fault. But you can say I want the top 5. I think it limited it to top 10 here. But we could have said, give me the top 20 or the top 25 or something like that. So you can imagine, and this is really good. So if you have, I don't know, you could probably think of scenarios in which you have, let's say, if you're, well, never mind. I don't want to get that far yet. I'm struggling to know. I'm trying not to get too far ahead of myself so far. So that is tip number 2. And actually, we're flying through this. I didn't know how long today was going to go. But I'm looking at my, because I have notes down here on my second monitor of what I want to get through, and we're already halfway through what I wanted to get through today. So today might be a shorter stream, and that's okay. Okay, so that is a table format. So, and we're not going to cover, this is an introduction to prompt engineering. I would not consider myself an expert prompt engineer at all. But you could see already that it's not that difficult to become an expert. And to be completely frank, I am skeptical that companies need to hire prompt engineers specifically. I think that could be just a skill set you could tack on to any existing role. So when I think about my own role as a machine learning engineer, I would see myself integrating the API into some system, and then doing the prompt engineering myself without having to do any sort of title change. In fact, I'm very curious, of the companies that did hire prompt engineers, how they're using them, and because my hunch is that they're probably just using, even though they have the prompt engineer title, they're probably doing a lot of the same activities as a machine learning engineer or a software engineer. It probably isn't that they're just typing things like that. I can't imagine a company hiring a person just to do this sort of thing that we're doing here. That seems frivolous. All right. Anyway, so that is all right. So we've covered the role. We've talked about doing the table. So let's talk about what is known as chain of thought prompting. So this one actually does have a name. This is what this next idea is the idea that you can have ChatGPT or these LLMs explain to you the thought process for how it got to the answer. So let me go ahead and do a 0-shot prompt, and then we're going to, with one question, and then we're going to take that same question, and we're going to do a little bit of the chain of thought thing, and you'll see how you get different results. So I'm going to ask this question here. What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Okay. All right, and for I'm sure many of you all know out there what this is in reference to. This is a Monty Python reference, and you can see that appropriately here. So I used to be obsessed with that movie when I was in Boy Scouts in particular. I don't know why. We were on the way to campsites and stuff. We had a dad that had like one of those like SUVs with a DVD player in it, and so he'd let us watch stuff, and it was always Monty Python or one of the Harry Potter movies, like only up through 4, because only the 4th movie was out at that time. But yeah, it was this was a really popular movie for us junior high kids, even though this movie came out well before I was even born. Anyway, so you can see what the result was here. It was pretty basic. It knew that I was asking the question specifically in the context of Monty Python. But let's see what happens when we try the chain of thought prompting here. So let me go ahead and start a new chat, and I'm going to ask this question again, but I'm going to ask it in a little bit of a different way, and you'll see how I'm going to do that. So what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? And what you can simply do, you can actually apply this to any prompt to generate the same outputs, is add this. Let's think through this step by step. And you can phrase that however you like. Basically asking it to think through it step by step. And you are going to see that we're going to get a different response here, and you're going to see that it's actually trying to figure out what kind of swallow it is. It's thinking through all these different like things. When I ran this a different time, actually let me show you again. When I ran it this time, and it looks, walk me through this step by step, you can actually see it gave me the velocity formula right here. So the velocity equals distance over time. And so that was a pretty stupid example, to be frank. But what you could imagine, when I was let's do a different one. So let's see how many. Let me think about this. Let me think of what. Okay, what is the periodic element for? No. Okay, now I'm trying to think of something that is a little bit more technical, like sciencey, if you will. And then we're gonna ask it a different way. So what is okay? I'm trying to think of. I wonder if they can do a math problem, because I know that these LLMs have struggled with math. What is 3 to the 4th, 3 squared divided by 3. All right. So it should just give us a very basic output. So obviously, 3 squared is 9. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So very basic. Now let's ask this again in a similar but different way. Sorry. So I'm just going to change this here in place. Walk me through this step by step. Oops. Apologize for that. All right. And now you're going to see that we're going to get a different explanation here. That wasn't, this was a terrible example. I should have given a better example than this. But basically, if you could think of that, if you have a more complex thing, it won't. So if it if you asked it why do we have to use unleaded gas in a car? I don't know. And it would give a straight answer, but if you asked it to do this chain of thought prompt by adding this, walk me through the step by step, it will give you a better answer than that. So, actually, let's do this with, no, never mind. I didn't, to be completely honest, it's been a really, really busy week for me. And I spent maybe, 30 minutes preparing for this Wednesday night, and then last night I was invited to judge a data scientist contest over at the University of Illinois in Champaign, and I kind of forgot to come back and add more material here. So you could see I'm grasping at straws to to kind of think of things on the fly, and obviously I don't do well at thinking things on the fly. And I was actually just talking to a friend about this the other day, watched some of these live streams about and they were telling me how it's They thought it was funny whenever I like, things don't go well. and I wouldn't say that today's not going well. Like, I've had some live streams that have gone off the rails, but right now I'm just struggling to think of good examples for this prompt engineering. But I hope you get the idea. The idea here is that when, if you're, this is especially useful for learning concepts. So I can imagine that if you were in a calculus class or a trigonometry class, you could ask it to solve the problem directly, like I tried to do here. This was just a little bit too simple. And then it would just give you the answer if you just did what is known as a zero-shot prompt. But if you asked it to walk you through step by step, like let's say you had a complex algebra problem, it would give in a zero-shot prompt, it would just give you the straight answer, x equals whatever. But that's actually a good example. Let's see if I can think of one. I have here. Let me make this bigger for you. I have an algebra problem that is the following: 8x plus 2 equals, I'm trying to think, 110. Yeah. What does x equal? So this is a pretty simple problem. All right. So, and it should be x equals 1. Yep. Now, it went ahead and kind of did this for me. I'm doing a bad job again, but basically, you could imagine that it would just give you the straight answer. But let's see what happens if I add let's think through this step by step. So I would imagine, like, if you had a much more complex problem than this, then it might just give you the straight answer. But you can do what this is going to do for you is it's helping you to build the intuition around why you solve a problem like this. And so algebra, actually, if you're not aware of this, so what algebra roughly translates to is balance. So and that's what we are trying to do here. So our original problem, we have 8x plus 2 equals 10, but we want to isolate the x variable, so the way that we do that is a constant rebalancing of both sides. So what we do with starting this off, we want to move the 2 over, and so how do we balance the 2 over with the 10? So we subtract 2 from both sides, and so when you subtract 2 from both sides, you get 8x equals 8 here. And then in order to rebalance again, let's say you just want to isolate that, you divide both sides by 8, as this is saying, and then when you divide both sides by 8, you get 1. Now, obviously, this was a very simple algebra problem, but you can imagine if you had a much more complex thing or a much more complex idea, the chain of thought prompting can be really helpful for helping to understand these complex problems. All right, so I did a terrible job of explaining, or at least using an example, but I hope you get the idea. All right, so that is that. Let me look at my notes here. All right. What was I thinking here? Hold on. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a second because I want to look at my Chat GPT history to see what I was thinking here. I'm looking at my notes and I'm like, I don't remember what I was trying to do here with this one thing. Okay. All right, yeah, no, now I remember what I was doing. Okay, so let's talk about grounding in general. So far we've talked about zero-shot prompting, few-shot prompting, but what we've really not talked about is this idea of grounding or priming. And so what this idea is, hold on, let me just hear myself for a second. The idea of grounding and priming, and this is what I was talking about sort of toward the beginning of of our time here, is if you can provide the right context to the LLM, then it can give you the most precise results, and I mean that very, very specifically. So far and it's basically taking several of the concepts that we've already talked about and putting them all together to produce the most precise, most exact result that we want to see. So let's go back into ChatGPT here and give a demonstration of that. And let me hold on just a second. I want to copy this down because I like the example that I used here, but it was a little bit complex. And I'm too lazy to remember that off the top of my head. All right, so let me share my screen again. Top right. There we go. All right, so I'm going to just paste in what I did the other day. So let's pretend I am a customer service representative, and I want to send an email, or let me take a step back. Let's say I want to send an email to a customer that just purchased a smartphone, and most smartphones are coming with these 6 months trials or of whatever. Like if you buy an iPhone, I know that it's not a music streaming service. I think you actually get like Apple TV Plus for 6 months. But let's pretend like you bought a smartphone and you get a free 6 months trial of this streaming service, and you want to send an email to the customer letting them know that if they don't cancel this subscription at the end of the 6 months, they will be automatically charged $9.99 a month. And then you can see that I put a couple of different contextual bits for grounding here. So what I did here is you can see that I'm noting the role. I am a customer service representative. The customer's name is me, David Hunley, and we will be specifically charged $9.99 a month, and the trial period ends in 6 months. So let's go ahead and see what happens whenever we do this. Now you can see that it is generating the email, and this is this is what I would call professional email, a professional email letting them know it's nothing too complex. It has a nice casual tone to it, and yeah. So and then you can see that we are ending the email as such. So that is what the whole idea of prompting or grounding is. And you can get, and we're going to take this over into Python here in a second, and you're going to see how we can really start to make this thing kind of work. Because you can imagine here, you wouldn't want to have to copy all this contextual information for grounding into the ChatGPT UI to produce this every single time. If you were, so like for example, I don't know exactly how they're doing this, but Salesforce recently announced what is known as Einstein GPT. So Einstein GPT is a product alongside the whole Salesforce product that is it's using ChatGPT APIs or OpenAI APIs behind the scenes to do a number of different things. And one of the things that you can do is basically what we're showing right here is this idea of like you can send an automated email to one of your customers letting them know this information. And I think they're basically piping in this information from like Salesforce Cloud, or to be clear, I'm not very familiar with Salesforce, so I might be screwing this up. But basically, they're piping this information in here without the user necessarily having to go out and figure out, okay, this is the customer. I know that they just bought an iPhone. Like it's all kind of automated, if you will. So and that's what I'm going to show you here in the next little bit. So but before we proceed forward, so this is a decent email. But let's say that I wanted to even be more specific than this. So I'm just going to continue the chat flow here. But you can imagine that if we actually, let me just edit in place here. Please write a professional email. I'm gonna add a couple additional qualifiers here. I'm gonna say a very cheerful. Very cheerful. I'm just gonna add the word very cheerful there, and you're gonna see it's going to be a little bit different. And I guess I should have done this separately. Well, let me just go ahead and show you what I did the other day with my test. So you can see I basically did the same thing. And then you see this here. Okay. And then I ask if we can write this in a more positive and upbeat tone. And you can see that it's using more exclamation points. It's using more qualifying adjectives like amazing, or you can see the word amazing there, or incredible, and things like that. And so you can imagine you can actually set the tone. And I guess that is the one thing that or even down here at the very bottom, warm regards. So you can see up here we say best regards, and now we're changing it to warm regards. And this email here, well, actually both of them look like it could have been written by a human being, but you can imagine that this one feels a little bit more welcoming, or and you can change the tone to be whatever you want it to be. Again, we are not using any specific programming language here. We are just using plain language. And you could see, can I write this email in more upbeat and positive tone? Yeah. So, all right, now let's, now that we've covered all these things, let's start to pull it all together and see how you can really cook with gas in a programmatic fashion. So what we're going to do here is we're going to come back into VS Code. And you might recall, I'm not going to cover necessarily the specifics of interacting with the OpenAI API. If you would like to know that, I did the stream on that last week. You can watch that on YouTube or on LinkedIn. But what I want to show here is I actually took the one of my blog posts that I wrote. So this blog post is on what I believe a machine learning engineer to be. And what we're going to do is we're going to pipe this into in a programmatic way, and we're going to programmatically ask it to summarize this post into a single paragraph. That way, if for whatever reason, you don't want to read through the entire thing, then you can just have a quick summary of it. And I can imagine this would be very useful to many leaders out there. Take this email and condense it down for me. And you can see it actually does a pretty good job. Well, actually, you have to know the content of the post, but the content, like if you know the content of the post, then you'll know it's really does a really good job. So I'm going to go to the Jupyter interface here, and now we are using VS Code. So this might look a little bit new to y'all, as it is new to me. So again, I'm not going to cover here what we are doing. So let me just briefly recap, I guess. So I have my OpenAI API key stored as like a secure file that I have just on my local workstation, my local MacBook here. I'm using a gitignore file to ignore it from being pushed into GitHub, which is very important because you don't want to expose that API key inappropriately. And then I'm using the Python OpenAI module in order to be able to interact with this appropriately. Now, which one do I want? I think it's this one. Yep, that's right. Okay, so now that we've instantiated that, so you might recall. All right, so let me think about this for a second. Yeah, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna load up this blog post programmatically into this Python into here. So loading the blog post text from file. So the way that we do that is with open data blog post text. And then I'm going to open that in the read format, R as F blog post text equals F dot read. All right, now if we just look at that really quick, here I'll do the same cell actually, blog post text. And again, this is actually a Jupyter notebook. It's just using the very clean looking VS Code plugin. So you could see this is the exact same text, and then it is broken up with new line characters at some point. Let me keep scrolling around here. Where are we at? I don't know. Okay, well, I can't find any new line characters, but I promise you they're in here. Okay, so what we need to do, if you recall, is we need to set up our chat flow. So setting up the chat flow. Now I'm going to call this chat flow equals that. Now, what I could do, and I'm not necessarily going to do this here, but you might recall we can set when we set the Jar Jar Binks kind of thing in setting the role, what we could do is the whole, little dictionary thing here of, role is the system. So the system user is going to be system. And then we could, and then we have to put content. And then we could say, you are an assistant that speaks like Jar Binks from Star Wars. Okay. Now, that's how we could do it. I'm going to comment this out for now because I don't actually want to run it like this. I just want to set up a chat flow, empty chat flow, and we're going to append this appropriately. All right, so empty chat flow. All right, now let's go ahead and append this appropriately. So the way that we do, or append our prompt, our blog post text as a prompt. Now, what you're going to see me do here is I'm going to set it to where anytime we pass through the blog post text as this variable, it is going to ask for a summary of this text, no matter what that text is. So the way that we do that is we're going to do chat flow.append. I gotta look at my notes here. How do we do this? Yeah. All right. So chat flow.append, and then role is user. So because we are acting as if we are the user, and then the prompt, or I'm sorry, not the prompt. The content is now I'm gonna do an F string here. Please summarize the following text into a single paragraph. Paragraph. And then within additional curly braces here, this is where I'm going to pass in my blog post text as such. All right, so now let's go ahead and look at this chat flow really quick. Chat flow, you can see that, it's kind of hard to read, but basically it's saying, you can see how programmatically it's always going to be, it doesn't matter what's behind this variable. It's always going to summarize the following text into a single blog post or into a single paragraph. So I could put any of my blog post text in here. And you can imagine if I had a whole, I only have one of these blog posts saved as a text file here, but you can imagine if I had these all saved as 10 different text files, I can just do a for loop and keep going and going and summarize them all, or as new ones come in. And so you can actually start to imagine how you could bake this into your systems in your company. So you can actually programmatically do something like this. And anytime a new document that, or like, let's say you have I'm trying not to use specific examples for my work. I'm thinking of out of pure respect for my work, I try not to, I don't reference them at all, even though I do love my job and everything I do, but I don't think it's appropriate to be using work related examples for this. I'm trying to think of an example that's not work related. Well, I can't think of one, but you could imagine that, if you're, well, I can't think of one. But you can imagine, basically imagine a long body of text that, let's say you're a book publisher. I don't know. This is a pretty stupid example. Let's say you're a book publisher and okay, well, I guess this is a decent example. You're a book publisher, a prospective author sends you their book and asks you to read it, and they don't want to provide you a summary of whatever that is for some reason. You can imagine when they send you their book as a PDF or whatever, you could pipe that text in, the full book text. I don't know if I don't know how much the input you could input as the text. Maybe you can't do a full book, but let's say it's a short story. I don't know. And then you can have it summarize it and then send it over to the primary editor, and that way they can have a clean summary without produced by ChatGPT without them ever having to read the book themselves. So there's an example for you. So anyway, so I've set up my chat flow. Now let's go ahead and invoke the API. So chat response equals OpenAI dot chat completion dot create. Now I'm going to set the model to be GPT 3.5 Turbo, just to keep things simple, Turbo. And I am going to, what? I can't see. All right, there we go. Messages equals chat flow. And again, it doesn't need to be called chat flow. I just call it chat flow just because that makes logical sense to me. So this might take a few seconds, but right now it's reaching out, calling out to the API and getting our response back for us. So let's see what happens here. All right, now, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and have it print or just look at the response whenever this is complete. All right, so it just completed. Let's view this in a simpler format. So let's pull out the choices. 0, message. Oops, sorry about that. Message, and then content. Okay, so this is just going to display. All right, so it is saying the role is. Well, let me. Is there a way I can copy this easily? I want to just copy this easily and put it in something else. This is I'm doing a really crappy thing right here. All right, so I copy this out, and then let me open, I don't know, Notepad. Well, I don't have Notepad on this machine, don't I? No, I don't want to do this. Can you tell I'm a little bit unprepared? So, Pages. How about Pages? Let's just open Pages. All right. Obviously, you can see I'd never use Pages. Pages is basically like the equivalent of Word on a Mac. Okay, so you can see that it did a pretty good job here. So it's, Well, you got to know what the content of the post is. But so basically how I define a machine learning engineer is by the skill sets associated to a machine learning engineer. So I talk about machine learning and deep learning. I talk about software engineering, and I talk about technical architecture. And then I talk about some other things. So while data scientists focus on finding data, blah, 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 machine learning, yeah. So I think it did a pretty good job here. But so this is much shorter than what the original blog post was. The original blog post was, I don't know, probably the equivalent of, I don't know, 6 or 7 pages. In fact, let's go ahead and just paste out the text and see what happens here. So I'm gonna, how do I do a page break? Page break. And there we go. All right, and paste that in. And yeah, how many pages is that? So 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of single space text, all condensed into one paragraph. And so now, yeah, and so again, like I was saying though, you can imagine how you could programmatically set up a system to where it is constantly looking for text like this, and you only have to set it up once like this. You only have to set it up where you are asking it to summarize like this one time. And you can imagine using the prompt engineering tricks with software engineering and the API integration, and you have this nice system that is constantly churning out these things without you ever having to go back and constantly copy paste all this stuff back into a UI form like that. Now, I guess we went 45 minutes, but that's really all I wanted to cover for today. So again, like I said, I am not necessarily an expert on prompt engineering, but you can see the prompt engineering actually is not that complex. And again, I would not recommend per se to hire a prompt engineer. Like I said, I don't necessarily know what is the value of a prompt engineer as opposed to a software engineer or a machine learning engineer like myself in doing these prompt engineering activities. But yeah, you could see when you start to combine those skill sets, you can start to do you could do some really cool things with that. And so that's prompt engineering, or an introduction to prompt engineering. So next week I'm hoping to be back. I really want to cover LangChain. I've been hearing LangChain a lot. I've been hearing a lot about Baby AGI or AutoGPT. I'd love to cover one of those things. I've not looked super deep into any of those yet. So we'll see if we can cover that next week. I really want to do one next week because 2 weeks from today, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom comes out, and you won't see me for a month. I'm being a little bit facetious, but look right here. I don't know, I'm pointing at Zelda. I don't know if you can see this up here. So this painting right here, you can't see because, the glass is actually reflecting my TV. So this weird rectangle is like actually my TV. I'm not pointing at it very well, but that's actually like a watercolor rendition of the Zelda Breath of the Wild background. I don't know if you can see up here. Up here, there are a few Zelda amiibo. Right here, there are a couple Zelda books. I don't know if you could tell, I'm a big Zelda fan. But I've put over the past 7 years, I've put close to 400 hours into Breath of the Wild. So I am pumped for Tears of the Kingdom, and therefore I want to get another stream in because I know when Tears of the Kingdom drops, you won't see me. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up here today. I hope you all have a good weekend. Thank you for watching, and we will hopefully see you next week. All right, take care.